I want to thank in advance all of our speakers. I'll thank them when they're all here. Some of them are with us now. Um, and I'd like to thank our financial manager, Liz Hutchinson, who is taking care of some of our tech needs, as well as our Presbytery leader, who is with us today, Jean Raddick. You are muted now, I hope. We aren't hearing anyone, so I'm assuming you are. Please don't unmute until you have a question or a comment. And I will leave it to each of our speakers to say when they'd like to field those. Some people don't mind in the middle of their presentation. Other folks wait till the end. So I'm sure they'll tell us what they'd like us to do. For now, though, we should begin as we should begin all things with a word of prayer. Eternal God, we pray that we will make stewardship a way of life, stewardship being the lifestyle of discipleship. May we be disciples of Christ in all that we do, in all of our relationships, and all of the responsibilities that we've been given. We acknowledge you as the source of all we have and all we are. Help us to place you, our loving Creator, first in our lives by becoming more prayerful, more focused on loving and caring for our families and our neighbors, and especially those in need, and contributing our gifts and service to your call upon our congregations. Help us to heed your call to be good caretakers and managers of all of your gifts, and to make your priorities our priorities, putting our faith into action. And in all things, may we serve you with a joyful spirit in mind and heart. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Just so you know who you can anticipate hearing from this morning, in just a moment or two, we will have our good friend Carrie Mitchell with us, and you can see Carrie there right now. She's coming to us from the Board of Pensions. At 10 o'clock, Catherine Lynch from the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program. 10:30, Rose Niles from the Presbyterian Foundation. And at 10:45, Pete Peterson, who you can also see on screen somewhere, is going to be reviewing our financial handbook. For those of you who aren't in Highlands, you may or may not want to stay, but our financial guidance is pretty general to the whole church. And Pete also brings a wealth of experience that you'll hear about. So there are a number of things that you probably will find useful, even if not every jot and tittle. So at this time, I would like to invite Carrie Mitchell to speak. Carrie tells me this is her 5th time attending this financial management workshop, which means she's been around longer than Highlands Presbytery has been around. Not to make her sound old, since Highlands is just a little bit, just a couple of years old. And she is a friend and a colleague from long before her time with the Board of Pensions. The Reverend Dr. Carrie Mitchell joined the board in 2019 as a church consultant. And prior to joining the board, she was the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church of Pittsford in New York. As a church consultant, Carrie attends to presbyteries in, and I hope this is a complete list, Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've left any states out, but there may be a few. Before entering full-time ministry, Carrie worked both in the government and in private sectors, focusing on telecommunications, and that includes time with the United States International Trade Administration. Carrie is a graduate of Susquehanna University, Georgetown University, Princeton Theological Seminary, and Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School. A place that whenever I hear it, I think, well, if Martin Luther King Jr. went there, it must be a pretty good place. So with all of that, I would like to welcome Carrie and thank you again for being here.
Steve, it's such a joy. Thank you very, very much. You went digging beyond my regular bio. Thank you. That's very, very kind of you. I love being with Highlands, and I don't care what you called yourself beforehand. You're just great people. And for those of you who are joining us from outside the bounds, it is equally good to see you this morning. Now, tell me whether or not you're seeing a shared screen. Is that working?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Now, I can't see all your faces. I'm trying to expand my Zoom box because Steve beautifully said it. Do I want to hear questions? I absolutely want to hear questions. So Liz and Jean, I'm not only grateful for your having me back for the 5th time, I'm going to be relying upon you all to interrupt me if you see somebody with a raised hand or a question or a face that's looking like, Carrie, slow down, because I'm not getting that. Can I call upon you guys to do that? Liz, that gives you something else to do.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It really is a joy to be with you all here this morning. As I looked at the Zoom screens, I did not recognize a ton of names that I immediately latch upon. So if this is something that you have already heard, I apologize. But there's going to be a lot of information that will be new because the board, believe it or not, even though we are 306 years old, the board's actually doing a couple of really significantly new things. And no matter what your role is, be it a personnel or financial person, somebody who is on session, somebody who's a ruling elder, somebody who's just very interested in these matters, I want to get across to you this. We are here for you. If you hear nothing else, the Board of Pensions is here for you. So like I said, I can't see everybody. I'm bringing the screen up so that I can as many as I can. But I'm curious, by a show of hands, okay, raise one hand if you like caring for the people who care for your church. Yep, I figured as much. And raise your hand if you like to do that so that you don't cost your church a whole heck of a lot. All right, I'm seeing lots of hands up. Just like a good football Saturday, you're poised to catch exactly what I'm sharing with you today. So what are we going to be talking about? Well, first of all, how about an orientation to who the board is and then what we do? Like I suggested earlier, we've been around for 306 years, and we cover more than 65,000 individual members. We're committed to wholeness and well-being. And what does that mean? Well, think of it this way. These pictures that I'm showing you are not stock photos. These are my colleagues. These are the folks that I have the pleasure of working with every day. There are approximately 200 of us total who work for the Board of Pensions. Most of us are located in Philadelphia at 2000 Market Street, right down from the Constitution Hall and Billy Penn's place. But those folks that you see, for example, Hallie answering the phones, or Lori making certain that your education programs are just what you need to make certain that you understand what we have to offer, or Todd, who makes certain that the numbers are working in our benefits plan, or Yvette and Suza, who makes certain that we're going to give you the best kinds of service that we can whenever you call into 1-800-PRES-PLAN. And that translates into, for those of you who are taking notes today, that translates into 1-800-773-7752. That's our member services and employer services phone number. Our folks are there from 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we want to make certain that you feel cared for at 1-800-PRES-PLAN, 1-800-773-7752. Now, we've been doing this for quite some time because we believe that all those who serve the church should be able to experience wholeness or shalom. So some time ago, when our current president, the Reverend Dr. Frank Clark Spencer, came onto the board, first he was on the board of directors of the Board of Pensions, and then he was hired as our president. And when he came to the board, loving it as a multiple generation Presbyterian, because his dad can trace back 5 generations, his mom can trace back 6 generations on the Presbyterians. He came and said, "This is great, board, but why do we do what we do?" So he gathered a bunch of smart people in a room and he told them, write me a theology of benefits. Most of them were academics. So they said, sure, do you want it to be 20 pages or 200 pages? And he said, I want it on one page. And they said, can we have footnotes? We did get it on one page. And I'm going to even boil it down to this phrase that you see. Our provision of benefits is holy work. And those footnotes are largely quoting scripture, including one of my favorites, which is John 10:10. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. And that's how we feel about providing benefits to those who serve the church. You already know that usually in a church, your largest line item on your budget is personnel. And if you break that down, the second largest item, salaries for your personnel being the largest, the second largest item is usually benefits. So we know that this is holy work, it's important work, and it is crucial to your budgets. So I want to share with you how we want to be able to communicate with you in a secure fashion. I'm just curious. I can't see everybody's hands. I'm going to try and scroll through the screens, but keep your hands up if this applies to you. If you are the employer representative to the board, that is the person who has access to Benefits Connect. I'm scrolling through. Give me a raised hand if you're our employer representative. I see Liz, I see Emily, and Janet. Hey, Janet, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Kevin. Hey, Kevin, it's good to see you. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So folks, you already know that Benefits Connect is our entirely secure portal for both choosing the benefits that you're going to provide to your employees, or maybe you're also somebody who receives benefits from us, and then you'd see the other side of the portal, which is you get to select your benefits. And for those of you who are in that latter category, I'm not going to shout out names because I know a few of you. I want to remind you that annual enrollment closes this upcoming Friday on November 10th. That's also the time that you want to make certain that you've finished your call to health challenges, if that applies to you. But what's beautiful about Benefits Connect? We are about to make it even better. In 2024, a lot of you have been asking for this. Carrie, can we have a couple of different logons so that my church finance person and my church personnel person can both have access to this? Yes, that's one of the main improvements that we're going to be doing. We're also going to have our ability to talk across our systems, better integrated, a better user interface. It's going to be fabulous. The price of improvement, though, friends, is that we're going to have to close public access to Benefits Connect starting November 22nd. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Please tell your folks who might be your employer representatives at your various churches. If you have any changes that you need to make electronically through our portal, please do it before Thanksgiving. Now, we'll still be there to answer 1-800-PRES-PLAN. You can still make changes to your personnel's benefits. That's all going to be possible. But I would just ask that if you've got something that you're anticipating is going to be a big move, that you be in touch with us and do it before Thanksgiving, definitely before November 22nd. I'm going to pause there for a second and ask if there are any questions, and I'm going to scroll through my Zoom screens. Nope, not seeing questions. Great. All right. That's Benefits Connect. So what are we going to cover for today? What do we offer? What are those benefits and packages? And then I'm going to focus in particularly on benefits in transition, because I know that the Highlands has fabulous churches. And I also know that churches are usually in some form of a transition or another. So I want to talk to you about what the benefits would be available. And when I go in through that benefits and transition, I'm going to tell you about two of the big things that the board is improving or transitioning for the service of the church. And then finally, I want to tell you about all the great bennies that once we've got people in the plan, and that's the key thing, we want to make certain we get people in the plan, then we can provide them all of these assistance grants, these education offerings. We really want to take care of those who take care of the church. So with that in mind, what are these plans? I want you to think of the 3 Ps in a pod, okay? Plans, programs, and packages. We offer benefits, and we offer them in 4 main categories: our retirement, our financial protection, our health programs, and then this lovely outlier called our tax advantaged accounts. Those are the main groupings for the benefits that we offer. And this is pretty standard for anybody who's providing benefits to an organization. We've got two kinds of retirement plans, be it both a defined benefit pension plan, which is our hallmark. That's why we're called the Board of Pensions. And then our retirement savings plan, which is the defined contribution plan. Our health programs. You have probably seen how the healthcare system in the US is struggling to make ends meet. We are committed to doing a pay-as-you-go system. None of my colleagues, none of the 200 of us earn any kind of a commission. We are the church. We charge exactly what it costs us to provide those medical benefits. We also have dental and vision eyewear, an employee assistance program, and right now a Medicare supplement plan that's about to change to a Medicare Advantage plan. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. Those financial protection programs, we want to make certain that in the whoops categories of the world, that if a person experiences some kind of a disabling situation, medically unable to do the job for which they were hired, either mentally or physically, medically unable, we want to be there to help folks. And in those times of transition, when you're losing a loved one, we want to be there to provide that financial security as well. And then those tax advantaged accounts, if you've ever had a flexible spending account or a health reimbursement account or a health savings account, you personally, then you know what these are. It's getting those tax-free dollars to individuals for their expenses of either medical situations or dependent care. And we offer those to our members as well. Remember, I said 3 Ps in a pod: the plan, the 4 programs that I was telling you about, and then we have packages. You're probably most familiar with that which is mandated by the Book of Order for those who are installed, the pastor's participation package. And as you can see, the dues are 39% of effective salary. And this is the breakdown for how each of those components of pastor's participation are priced. Now, that's also about to change. I'm going to get to that, but I want you to know that that package is not only available to those who are installed, it's mandated for pastors who are in an installed position. But if you've got an individual pastor who would like to be in this particular plan, and you can make that possible for them, they can have that option. Pastor's participation is possible for ordained individuals in the PCUSA. So what else does that bring us? Well, part of pastor's participation, as you know, is our medical plan. For pastor's participation, it's PPO family coverage. That's the mandate. But we also have 3 kinds of coverage in medical: preferred provider organization, PPO; EPO, exclusive provider organization. That means that you have to stay within the Blue Cross Blue Shield network. And then finally, high deductible health plan, which is exactly what its name would imply. You have a high deductible, and then your benefits and your coinsurance kicks in. The medical plan special features are there. I'm going to jump up and down about a couple of them. Just wanted you to see the full range of 10 possibilities. The one that I really want to highlight, because in the 5 years that I've been serving the church, I've been serving the church in this particular capacity. I've been watching this kind of a bell curve. When I came on in 2019, we were pre-pandemic. We had individuals who might have made use of the employee assistance program, where you can get 6 free counseling situations, 6 free counseling sessions per situation, and you can stack those situations so that you maintain a relationship with a mental health provider. Okay. And in 2019, I saw some decent use of the employee assistance program to do that and many other things that you see on the screen. Then pause for a second. Remember what it was like on March 13th, 2020. The world changed. And I saw more and more people saying, you know what? I could really talk to a healthcare professional. And they did. So we saw increased use of the employee assistance program. And I think that has helped to continue to destigmatize the use of mental health provision. It's really important for people to talk to somebody. I've served churches where they had Stephen ministers, and one of the mottos of Stephen ministers is everybody could use a Stephen minister, even a Stephen minister. We all need to talk to somebody. Pray to God, absolutely, but check in with God's other creations, because they've got good things to listen and help you with as well. So we've got that employee assistance program doing all those spectacular things. I'll get back to some of the other special provisions, but I want to remind you, particularly those of you who might be serving churches where you don't have an installed pastor, that we have an option in our packages. Remember, plans, programs, and packages. We've got 2 packages, pastor's participation and now minister's choice. Minister's choice is everything that pastor's participation is minus the medical. So we're able to back out that 29% of effective salary and still provide this fabulous financial protection plan that you can't get anywhere else. We make certain that the pastor that you are covering with this minister's choice plan has temporary disability, has death and disability, and we throw in the employee assistance program and the defined benefit pension plan for that 10% of effective salary. It becomes a really affordable option, particularly if you have a pastor who might be on Medicare already. So they've got their medical. They don't need the full provision of our PPO family plan. Or you might have a pastor who's able to access healthcare through a spouse or through the exchanges. Minister's choice is a viable option and a really good possibility to provide this kind of financial security and make certain, going back to John 10:10, that the person who's serving your church can have life and have it abundantly. Now, I also want to highlight for you, because a lot of you may have other staff on your churches, that there are benefits that you can offer to non-pastoral employees. These 3 particular benefits you can offer at no cost to the church. And you can offer these to anybody on your staff who's getting a W-2. I don't care if they're the person taking care of your lovely children in the nursery for 1 hour a week, or if they're a person who's working way too many hours anyways. No matter the number of hours per week, as long as you're giving them a W-2, not a 1099, they can have access to these 3 plans. And what do I mean by that's no cost to the church? You can, through voluntary salary reduction, have that person pay for it. Our Vision Eyewear plan, for example, is $4.12 for a member per month. Really inexpensive to be able to give glasses or contacts to the person. And I highlight this to you because benefits are like the sauce that make everything savory and delicious in your relationship with your employees. It's sort of the glue that holds us together. It says to the employee, I see you, you're important to us, we're going to provide you access to benefits. And when we do that as an employer, people tend to stick around and demonstrate greater job security and job effectiveness and job satisfaction. So I highlight those to you. I recommend them to you. If you've got any staff who are that you would like to create a better relationship with, you might consider offering these benefits to them. Now, we've gone through sort of a whirlwind overview of what it is that we offer and who we are and what our theology of benefits is. I'm going to scroll through the screens. I don't see anybody with their eyes glazed over. This is good. Any questions, folks? All right. Pace okay? Going too fast? Sometimes I speak in a New York minute. All right. Thanks for the thumbs up, folks. Great. So what do we do in transitions? We know that the constant in the world is change, right? So I want you to know that when you have pastors who are moving between calls, that we have these catch-alls to make certain that they're going to be okay and that they want to move on to your church next and to serve you next. When somebody comes out of pastor's participation in a particular call and they're not yet ready to take the next call, we make certain that we at the board gratis give to that pastor a full month's coverage in the medical PPO. So their family continues to be cared for a full month after their departing church has concluded paying for their benefits. Let me give you a rock solid example. Let's say that your pastor is concluding with you this month, November 15th. We don't prorate our bills. So if your pastor's leaving November 15th, we're going to charge you for all the month of November. But we're also going to give to that pastor the entire month of December, all the way December 31st, and we're going to make certain that their family is covered for medical. We're also going to make certain that they have 3 months worth of death coverage. So for December, January, and February, we'd make certain that, heaven forbid, something tragic happens, that their survivors would have that important reassurance of coverage from the board. Set that aside for a second. Let's say you've got a pastor who is moving beyond that no cost coverage period. They haven't figured out where they're going to go next, but they are searching. They'd be in touch with Steve or with Jean, and Steve and Jean would assert to us, yes, this pastor is searching for their next call. And then we would be able to provide to them transitional participation coverage. What does that mean? The individual pastor can choose whether or not he or she would like to continue to self-pay for their coverage. And I'm going to show you this in a second in detail. And then medical continuation, which is our equivalent of COBRA, but we don't have to call it COBRA because we're not covered by those particular financial regulations that would make it be called COBRA. We'll get into that in a second. And then the other transition opportunity is Humana's Medicare Advantage. And again, I'm going to dive into that in a second. By the way, in case any of you are wondering and you're madly scrambling to do notes, I always give Steve and Jean and Liz a PDF copy of this file, which will be available through them to you if you need to go back and review some of this information. So fear not, we're here to help you. Transitional participation coverage, as I started to go down that road. It's for those who are in between, it's self-paid, and it allows for the individuals to make certain that they can be covered in the way they want to. So if you've got pastor's participation, remember that listing of the things that you have: death and disability, temporary disability, pension, medical coverage, and employee assistance plan. The individual pastor can choose which of those that they might want to continue to pay for themselves in this transitional time. And they get to do it on their choice of two cost bases, either their departing effective salary or the church-wide median effective salary, which is $64,800 in 2023, $64,800 in 2023, the church-wide effective median. So let me give you a concrete example of that. Let's say that your pastor who's moving from your church and still looking for the next call just knows that they want to pay for their pension credits, so they keep up that lovely compounding effect of their pension credits accumulating. Well, let's say that that pastor is earning an $80,000 effective salary. They're going to want to continue with that $80,000 effective salary pension credits, because that's how we calculate our pension. It's on the dollars of effective salary. So they're going to choose the higher cost basis to calculate their pension and pay that 8.5% of the $80,000 so that they continue to get their pension credits at that marker, rather than getting a smaller pension credit paying for the $64,800. Conversely, let's say that this pastor knows that he or she needs to continue their family medical coverage. Well, let's use that $80,000 example again. Let's say the pastor is earning $80,000 in their departing call. They're not going to want to pay 29% of $80,000 for their family's medical coverage. They're going to want to take the cheaper cost basis, which is the median effective salary, $64,800. So that's what they're going to choose to do. We provide this kind of flexibility because we know that pastors are moving across presbyteries, within presbyteries, between calls. They need that kind of flexibility. It's up to 24 months of coverage, and you can move from transitional participation to medical continuation, but you can't go the reverse. You can't have medical continuation first and then go back to transitional participation. So what is that medical continuation? Like I said, it's COBRA. It's the ability to continue to pay for just medical. You don't have the ability under this particular provision to pay for pension credits or to carry temporary disability or death and disability. It's just making certain that you could continue to provide that medical coverage to your family. It's for 18 months. You can cancel it any time, but it is at a higher premium. So we hope that folks can find other alternatives before having to go to that, but it is there should you need it. And then finally, I'm putting in here the Medicare supplement plan because that's about to change. As I said, we don't get any commissions. We had been in our Medicare supplement plan for those who are retiring from their particular callings and eligible age-wise to have Medicare, and then with us, the Medicare supplement plan. That Medicare supplement plan has always been self-funded by us. We collect dues, we pay out benefits, self-funded. We recognize that our healthcare system is broken. You have seen the medical trends. You have seen your own premiums go up. In particular, drug costs are driving those changes. So we looked around and said, it wouldn't be right. We would not be good stewards of our money to say to our retirees that we're taking the premium, which had been in 2022, the premium for Medicare supplement had been $275 per person per month. Last year, we had to raise it to $340. Our actuaries, as they look at the costs, are telling us that in 2024, we would have had to have raised that into the $400 per person per month, above $400 per person per month. We have retirees on fixed incomes. It wasn't the right thing to do. So we went out and we talked to a bunch of different providers and said, we're facing these high costs. What might you be able to do? And we went ahead. As you can see, there were fewer than a third of our retiree households that were using the Medicare supplement plan because the price had been so cost prohibitive. We went ahead and we partnered with Humana so that in 2024, and for those of you who are retirees, you know who you are. There are a couple on the screens there. If you were in Medicare supplement plan, you got an announcement from us that you had the invitation to choose the Humana Medicare Advantage plan. I'm telling the rest of you folks on this screen so that if you've got a pastor who's moving into retirement mode, or you know of other pastors with whom you might be serving on your committees on ministry or whatever other roles, let them know that this Humana Group Medicare Advantage plan is there for them. And here's the good news. Remember I was talking to you about those high premiums per month? Humana and the deal that we have struck with them, good for the next 4 years, guaranteed. Guess what the premium is? Anybody? Anybody want to guess what the premium is? I'm jumping through the screens. Anybody want to guess? Oh, I saw a hand up. Ruth, what's the premium going to be? Do you know? $0. You got it. The premium for our Humana Medicare Group Advantage plan is going to be $0 per person per month, guaranteed for the next 4 years. And you're saying, why? How can you get something for nothing, Carrie? The fact of the matter is that the federal government pays to these Medicare Advantage plans a head tax. You're well familiar with per capita taxes, right? And they skew it a higher head tax the older the population that they're serving. Our particular Medicare supplement plan tends to skew older than 80. Our participants are older than 80. So we're a very attractive population to these Medicare Advantage plans. And that's how they make their money. They don't have to charge those premiums. They're getting that already from the government, and now they can provide some very rich benefits. So this is what our retirees can expect. They should have already received enrollment packets or opt-out packets if they're eligible right now. So if you know of folks that have questions about this, please send them our way or have them call 1-800-PRES-PLAN. There's also a webinar, which you can see from the dates up here that we've already had 2 of them, but there's another one coming up next Tuesday, and that's going to be the last one that we're offering in this immediate time frame. Pausing there. Any questions about Humana? Nope. Okay. One more thing. If folks are wondering what their alternatives might be, here are some resources for finding other coverage. And if you're in that place where you're looking for your own Medicare supplement plan, not for your pastor, but for your own, these are a couple of good websites and resources for you. You can go ahead and do an Advantage overview or comparison using these websites to know whether or not you like the coverage for whomever you might be using if you're in that lucky category of already being retired and using Medicare. Okay, so I'm going to leave that screen up for a second in case people want to take a note of it. And like I said, the PDF's coming to you when you need it. All right, I told you that we were making 2 big changes. The Medicare Advantage was the one big change. The second big change is we are restructuring our benefits plan. I'm going to pause there because in 1987, we put together the first plan, the plan that you've come to know as pastor's participation, or the traditional benefits plan, that package that gives pastors their death and disability, their pension, and their medical coverage. We recognize that a lot has changed in the church. This is a bit of an eye chart of a screen, but I want you to realize that we have not been able to get everybody in the plan. And we're not pleased about that. We recognize that there are a ton of pastors who've been ordained, but an indecent percentage of them have not been able to be provided benefits. And even more sadly, most of those, that 63%, are women. So why are we excluding the people that need these kinds of benefits the most? Well, a lot of these plans have been structured such that you had to have that full family coverage. You had to have all the financial protection plans. And we recognize that that full family coverage, the PPO for full family coverage, that doesn't apply to more than 50% of those to whom we're providing benefits right now. They don't have a family. So why do we mandate it? And why do we charge for it? So we went and we started listening. We listened to the church. And what we heard is, don't focus on special people, pastors, right? We know that we've been providing benefits across the board to all employees, anybody who gets a W-2. And we've seen that when we price medical for those who aren't pastors, who aren't in either in the pastor's participation package, that when we price medical, we're usually pricing it very competitively. I say usually because California with Kaiser and the monopoly that they have out there, we recognize that we're not going to be able to meet those rates. But for the rest of the nation, we really are very competitively priced, and we've seen people take us up on the medical coverage that we have, so much so that we now have more lay people in the plan than we have pastors. So we're going to move away from this focus on special people. We're going to focus now on leadership in the congregations. So that includes commissioned ruling elders, commissioned lay pastors, whichever terminology you prefer to use. We're going to be able to cover them with this same kind of protection package and medical coverage. And we're going to give congregations and pastoral leaders the tools to discern how to do this. So just this past week, our board of directors met, and they had the opportunity to hear a draft of our plan that they're going to vote on in final form in March of 2024. And that's when we're going to be able to release the final plan in March of 2024, which will be rolled out 1/1/25. What we think, this is what we presented to the board of directors, what we think is going to happen is that right now, as you can see, we charge a percentage of salary so that benefits are provided to all of these kinds of groupings. The one-person icon is the member. The two-person icon is the member and spouse. This icon is for the member and dependents without a spouse. And this final little icon is a full family coverage. We used to charge a flat percentage for just that, and we used to mandate that the churches pay that 29% of effective salary. Here's what we're moving to. We're going to provide benefits for the member, and we're going to charge a much lower percentage. And then we're going to make available for those families, for those pastors who have dependents in whatever configuration, that they can purchase the coverage that they want at very reasonable rates. Remember, I talked to you about how we get our pricing right. We know that it's competitive in the market. And so that would be, if your church has a pastor in pastor's participation right now, you can imagine in 2025 that the coverage price for that package, whatever it comes to be called, is going to be lower. And if that pastor has dependents, you as a church can then decide how much more of that money that you have saved you're going to make available to the pastor so that they can provide benefits at that reasonable price to their dependents. It's going to be a win-win situation for our churches, and we're very excited about it, and we want to continue to work with churches to make that work. Now, our season of rebuilding is the moniker that we're using for this initiative change, and we have a microsite. You can see the website right there. It's on pensions.org, and you can give your input. You can participate in virtual town halls. Our last two for 2023 are taking place next Tuesday and Wednesday. You'll see that on the website, and you can provide feedback to us. You can hear folks. You can hear Reverend Dr. Frank Clark Spencer giving an overview of this at that virtual town hall next week if you're curious about it. All right, we're on to the third thing. I think I'm still on track for time. We are. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to move through screens to see if I'm seeing confused faces, questions. Okay, great. Thanks for the feedback. Really appreciate it. John in particular, thank you for saying, no, we're good. We're good. Thank you. All right, assistance in education programs. Once we've got people in the
Excuse
plan.
me, can you
Yeah,
hear me?
go ahead.
Ma'am, I have one question that I want to ask you quickly, so I don't forget it. And it
Go.
pertains to the benefits for anybody who has a W-2 through the church.
Yeah,
And it says, for example, you said retirement, dental, or vision. Could you expound on that? Give me any more information, or could you?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I'm looking at all my screens and going, who's asking the question? Who's that?
Bill Ellsworth. This is my wife's computer, so I mean, she set it up for me, so I have no idea what I'm doing. The only thing I knew how to do was to mute and unmute. So
You're in great shape. I appreciate it, Bill. So
Yes.
let me tell you a little bit more about those three. And I'm really glad you asked, because we
Thank
do
you.
want to be able to offer benefits to anybody who gets a W-2. The retirement savings plan, like I said, it's the ability that we offer for the individual to work with Fidelity, our third-party partner, and you can have access to that retirement savings plan so that the employee can, through voluntary salary reduction, set aside pre-tax dollars or Roth post-tax IRA dollars. I'm sorry, Roth post-tax dollars to purchase those investment options. We have several funds through Fidelity that are possible, including target date funds. And many of you might be familiar with that terminology. It's sort of the fix it and forget it plan. I know I'm going to retire in 2035, so my risk is going to be greater with that fund mix earlier on. And then as I get closer to 2035, it's a less risky combination of investments in that fund choice, target date funds. So we make available in our partnership through Fidelity the ability for an employee to set aside those dollars and put them into the retirement savings plan. And the beauty of that is that the entire cost to the individual for the whole year for access to Fidelity is only $15. Only $15. And the church doesn't have to pay for it, can't pay for it. It comes out of the employee's voluntary salary reduction. That's the retirement savings plan. The dental coverage, we have both DMO, that is direct dental maintenance organization, and PPO, preferred provider organization. We partner with Aetna, working with our dental provision. And as you can imagine, the PPO would be a little bit more expensive than the DMO. And you can have care for the member and all those other configurations up to the member and family. My family uses the dental coverage, for example. So for us, for DMO coverage, because we live in a densely populated area just south of you, for those of you who are in Highlands, we live just north of Princeton. We're able to use DMO coverage, and it costs my family $1,200 a year for all of our dental provision, all of our preventive work, credits towards our kids' orthodontia, and maintenance work for dental. DMO and PPO coverage at a very reasonably priced point, which that cost can be passed on to the employee or borne by the church, either way. And then finally, Vision Eyewear. For those of you who might have peepers, either hardware or the soft contacts or the hard contacts, we want to provide that ability to get those less expensively. And as I said, it's $4.12 per person for the member. That's the coverage per month. So it's a very reasonable plan. Does that get at answering your questions about those three options that we have available to anybody who gets a W-2?
Yes, I do get it, and it would be up to the church's option to pay in, but primarily it's all going to be on the employee.
You got it.
Okay. Very insightful.
And you can make that available to anybody. It's so great.
But
Thanks for asking.
They have to get a W-2 from the church, correct?
That's correct.
All right,
That's
thank you.
correct.
That answers all my question. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Gary, there's a question here. If a retiree switches to the Advantage,
Mhm.
may they return to the other options during the open enrollment periods? Is that option to leave the Advantage and return guaranteed?
Our plan allows you to leave, and you want to check with the provisions of other plans as to whether or not you could opt back into them. Each Medicare Advantage, each supplement plan has its own bylaws, as you can imagine. but we allow for that possibility to go out, and our Medicare Advantage would allow you to come back in. It's a great question. The other thing that I want to clarify is a lot of our retirees have said, oh, we want to be in Medicare Advantage on 1/1/24, but they're not yet eligible. Right now, we've had to limit the eligibility in 2024 to those who were in our Medicare supplement plan, to those who were in our Medicare supplement plan all the way through December 31st of 2022 and opted out in 2023 because of that huge rate increase that I told you about. But now they want to be back in Medicare Advantage. So that's the second category of eligibles. And those who are going to continue to retire in 2023, they're eligible, or those who retire in 2024. Right now, that's all the people that are eligible for our Medicare Advantage plan. We anticipate that that eligibility category is going to be massively broadened in 2025. We don't know yet the details, but we are hopeful that we would be able to provide to all of our retirees, and maybe even those who are Medicare age eligible but still working. We hope. We don't know, but right now what we're saying is that we're going to expand eligibility in 2025. So stick around, watch this channel, stay tuned.
Thank you, Carrie.
Great question,
of you may
Steve,
have
and whoever
noticed-
put it in the chat.
Thank you, David, for that question. Now, some of you may have seen a bunch of chat notifications popping up, and that is one of my colleagues is being very diligent and putting up all of these different websites and other addresses Carrie's provided. But the last of those is about the Medicare Advantage plan. And so if you're interested in this, you will want to check out that website that's in your chat right now.
Jean or Liz or whoever was doing that, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, because I know I'm talking like a New York minute. All right, I don't want to take too much more time for you folks. And for those of you who are like, yeah, I don't need to know this, Carrie, snooze, why did I have to come on this early? I apologize. Thank you very much. Okay, once we've got people in the plan, what can we do for you? Assistance in education.
We
Yes,
do
dear
have
heart.
we have one more question. Is the W-2 plan available now?
The W-2 plan.
Just what it says in the chat.
Okay. So maybe you're thinking about the RSP, the dental and the vision eyewear. If you've got a W-2, if you're providing a W-2 to your employee, are they available now? That's a nuanced question. So whoever asked it, can you come off mute and let's get at what you're really asking?
This would be Sheila.
Yes, is the plan that folks are getting a W-2 plan now? Will they be able to get the vision eyewear and all of those discounts now? Or is the plan, we're waiting for the plan to be implemented?
Okay, so let me check a couple things. A W-2 plan, that's not what we're talking about.
No,
A
I'm not.
W-2 is a
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. A W-2 is a form that is provided to an employee that reports their income for the year. And
Yeah.
that's the eligibility gate. It's not a
Right,
plan.
I
It's
understand
what the federal government provides to say this is what you've earned for the year. So if somebody gets a W-2,
Right.
they would be eligible for the retirement savings plan, the dental and the vision eyewear.
Okay, and is that in effect now?
It is in effect now.
That was my question, I'm sorry. Okay.
Excellent. No, that's okay. But the reason I'm digging down is because there is a little bit of nuance there. The retirement savings plan, somebody can opt into that plan. An employee can opt into that plan at any point in the year.
Okay.
It's not subject to annual enrollment timeframe strictures, constraints. Okay.
Thank you.
The dental and the vision eyewear, as an employer, you, the church, had to have said to us that you wanted to provide dental and vision eyewear to your employees. You had to say that to us in the summer during employer agreement season. And then during annual enrollment season, your employees could have gone in and say, yes, I want dental, or yes, I want vision eyewear. And they could have chosen to pay for it, or you could have chosen to pay for it.
Okay.
But it's constrained by the employer agreement and annual enrollment time constraints as to when it can be offered.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
I'm going to even give you more nuance, my dear, because if you have somebody who's having a life event change, Let's
Right.
say you have an employee whose spouse had been providing the dental and vision eyewear coverage, and that employee's spouse loses their coverage. That's called a life event change. So that your employee could then say, here's the substantiation, here's the proof that my spouse lost the coverage that we were dependent upon. Then we can legally offer that at any point in the year with a life event change form proof. We can make that available to the employee and the employee's family.
Wow, okay.
Does that make sense?
That's great. Yes, thank you so much for taking the time.
And
Absolutely.
Gary, Doug Smith has asked, and he may want to fill in what he means. What happens after 4 years?
Great question, Doug. We often get this question, and in particular, our EVP for benefits. If any of you has ever seen Pat Haynes in action, I love this woman. She's amazing. Pat has assured us that when we sent this RFP, this request for proposal out to the various providers, we were absolutely certain that we were going to take care of our retirees. We feel very strongly about our folks, and we wanted to get them the best deal. So we got that 0 premium for 4 years. We're going to continue to hold Humana's feet to the fire. We're going to continue to look at renegotiating. What's going to happen after that? We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I can promise you that the board is going to be your biggest 800-pound gorilla advocate. And that premium would not go up some shocking amount. Maybe we're able to keep it 0. I don't know. Nobody knows. Got a crystal ball? Anybody want to, win the stock market for us? But we will be there to make certain that we negotiate well, and we don't have to stick with Humana. We would hope to, because we don't want to disrupt people again. But we will negotiate after that 4th year. David, does that answer your question? Great.
And David has another question.
Good.
Do retirees have choice of going to the Advantage plan or staying in the original Medicare plan? And
Medicare supplement plan's going away. It's not a choice. The choice you have is for those who are eligible, opt in, or for those who are eligible and don't want it, opt out. That's the choices. I'm going to jump just for time purposes, cover this really, really fast. Our assistance program is funded by your Christmas Joy offering. Thank you very much for those churches that collect it. We want to make available more money to those who need assistance. We have a number of grants, some that are available to all active members. Remember, I'm going to be sending this to you, so don't worry about it. It's also on the website. Those are the grants that are available to all active members. These are the grants that are available to pastors in active service, 2 kinds of debt reduction plans, and 2 kinds of Sabbath sabbatical / clergy renewal and support grants. And then finally, assistance grants for our retirees, particularly to make certain that they can retire in dignity. We have a number of pastors who actually are earning more in their housing and income supplements and retirement than they did while they were working, because we want to be that generous to them to retire in dignity. Lifelong learning through Board University, there's all these possibilities that we have. Again, once we have somebody in the plan with something as inexpensive as that retirement savings plan, $15, right? Then they can have access to these grants and to these Board University offerings. If you've got questions, you can reach me. You can reach my colleagues. They're available 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. at 1-800-PRES-PLAN or at memberservices@pensions.org. And look at that, folks. I'm at 9:55. I'm going to stop sharing screen, and I will be happy. I'll stick around. I will happily answer questions. If you want to stick them in the chat for me, or if you want to offline me at a later time, that's great as well. And I'm looking for the button to stop sharing screen, folks. So bear with me as I get to that. I have to expand
Harry, while
this.
you look for that, for those of you in Highlands, should have received this week and in upcoming newsletters reminders that for the Christmas Joy offering, now is the time to get permission from your session to ask for it and to begin publicizing it, because Christmas is not very far away right now, and you can take it throughout Advent. So please look for that and act on it so that you can do things decently and in order.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to everybody for participating. If there are questions, and I didn't totally
Someone
bore
asked
you.
if this presentation will be available, and I can say the recording will be available, and Carrie's very good about getting her PowerPoint to us. And so those things will all be on the Highlands website.
Godspeed, everybody. Enjoy the next
Carrie.
speaker and offering, because my colleagues are fabulous. Blessings,
Thank you so
everybody. Hey,
much,
Catherine.
Carrie. Terrific as always. May I ask, Liz, is Catherine Lynch with us at this point?
I am.
You are. Wonderful.
Yes, I
I can
am.
give you a couple extra minutes.
Oh, okay.
So, folks,
Whatever works.
I am pleased to introduce Catherine Lynch to you. And my first question that you can answer once I finish the introduction is, I noticed that there are a number of things that refer to ILP as opposed to PILP. And I didn't know if this was a rebranding or just saving a space on the page. So you can tell us how that's working.
Okay.
But Catherine worked in the synods of the Trinity and Mid-Atlantic, as well as states of New Jersey and South Carolina. She has been with PILP since 2000. And believe it or not, I met Catherine not long after that. So
Yeah.
that was a little while ago, a minute, as my
Yeah.
kids say. She
Mhm.
works directly with churches and middle governing bodies in her area, providing them with loan and investment information. Before her current ministry, she worked in funds development, public affairs, government relations, and marketing communications. She lives in Western North Carolina and is a member of Tryon Presbyterian Church. And I would be grateful for Catherine's presence under any circumstances, but special thanks for her today. This is the weekend of the PILP board meeting, and so it always coincides with our workshop. But not only is that happening, but Catherine's longtime colleague and the current president of PILP, and an all-around nice guy, Jim Rissler, is going to be retiring soon. And a celebration of that is happening very shortly. And so we've built the schedule around Catherine's availability so that she can go, and she must. But Catherine, not only thanks to you for this, but please pass our congratulations on to Jim.
Yes, I will. Oh. Okay. So I go now. All right. So good morning, and so good to see you again, Steve. Yes, I was looking back. I think that was 2006, actually, when we worked together. Seems like yesterday, but yes, I'm the East Coast field rep for the program. I'm based in Western North Carolina in a little town called Spindale, which is about an hour west of Charlotte. And my territory is New Jersey, south through the Carolinas. And I started with the program in 2000. I moved to Western North Carolina in 2013. Before that, I lived in Wilmington, Delaware, much closer to New Jersey. So, and did spend quite a bit of time up in New Jersey. So my territory focus changed a bit, but still covering New Jersey and loving that. I do have some slides to share. So I will share my screen, hopefully successfully at this point, and put this information up. Let's see. Does everybody see that? Okay, just
Yep.
want to be sure that you have my contact information. And interesting that you asked the difference between PILP and ILP. It's simply that this whole reference to us as PILP, some people a little negative, I guess. And so we're embracing ILP versus PILP. Either one is fine, whatever you prefer, but we're just kind of leaning into ILP rather than PILP. So That's all that is. And that's interesting that you noticed that, Steve. I get very few questions about that. We're trying to do it subtly, and I guess that's what's occurring. But what I'd like to do this morning is start off by providing.
Old email address to her new one or something. I don't know.
I'm sorry?
When she gave me her new email address and she said that she was willing
Excuse me,
to participate.
someone might be off
And then-
of mute. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'd like to do this morning is just start off with providing you the program's mission, a brief overview of the investment and loan program, which will cover our 2 loan funds that sometimes can get confusing. So there's 2 loan funds, each of which provide funding for our incentive loans, which include the Restoring Creation loans for energy savings projects. So the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program, our mission is to promote church growth by offering low-cost loans for our Presbyterian building projects. Our larger loans are funded by an investment that we offer. It's referred to as a term note. Think of it as kind of like a CD. And our smaller loans, $550,000 and under, are funded through the PCUSA endowment funds. And that endowed loan program is only for churches and for loans under 550. It was started in the 1890s, goes way back, and those funds reside in the endowment of the Presbyterian Foundation. The loan funds for our larger loans over 550 and for refinancing and non-churches such as camp and conference centers is the investor loan program. That was created in 1995 at the General Assembly, and it was really to ensure that churches of all sizes and types, including new church developments, would have access to enough loan funds for larger building projects, both for new and existing buildings. The General Assembly voted to put the 2 loan funds together in 2001 in order that there's just one source for loan funding within PCUSA, one office, one staff, one loan program, and I represent both loan programs. I'm going to go to my next slide. The investment and loan program offers discounted incentive loans to help enable accessibility projects and incentive loans for those projects that provide for energy savings. The Energy Savings Loan Program is referred to as Restoring Creation Loan Program, created in 2015, and it was through the General Assembly's very strong support to reduce fossil fuel concerns that the Presbyterian Foundation and the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program partnered to create the Restoring Creation Loan Program. The program helps churches explore projects and really encourage proactive steps in advancing green initiatives. With the energy savings loans, we offer a lower interest rate. Today it begins at 4.75, 1 point below our endowed rate, which is at 5.75. Our investor funds are at 6.75, so any funds coming through that would be at 4.75 for the Restoring Creation. Also, we have lower equity requirements. We only ask that 10% of the funds be available, and we'll finance 90%. With our traditional program, it's 20/80. So that would be, say, you have $100,000 Restoring Creation loan project. If the church can come up with 10,000, we'll work with you to finance the 90,000. So it makes a lot of projects very doable. And we also look at flexible loan terms, considering the length of return on investment. That comes in play with solar panels and how you're going to be able to spend less money on energy, and that can help finance the project. With the energy savings loan projects, loans, congregations are really encouraged to renovate their buildings using energy efficient products and renewable energy sources, saving on the energy costs while helping to ensure that your church buildings reflect who we are as a community of faith. So there's several, I'm going to give you several examples of the energy savings projects. This is not a definitive list. Certainly solar panel installations, high efficiency HVAC systems, which let me tell you, if you put in a new HVAC system, it's no doubt going to be more energy efficient than that old one. So most all HVAC systems qualify for this program, and they can be quite costly. So it's very helpful. Energy efficient lighting systems, insulation, roofing systems, and we're constantly hearing about other projects unique to perhaps that community. Things have changed that all of a sudden they're able to get rid of their oil system and there's a gas line now, and even that is an improvement. So lots of things happening in our communities, and we're open to looking at it in terms of being energy efficient. Since its inception in 2015, we've dispersed over 12 million in loans jointly between the endowed and the investor loan programs through this Restoring Creation loan program. So some of the advantages of the program, again, the endowment funds, when an energy comes to us for an energy efficient loan, there is up to $300,000 available from the endowed loan program. And if needed, another $300,000 available from the investor loan program. So that's a total of $600,000 that a church may receive at a discounted rate. As I mentioned, the rate is 1% below the base rate of each of the two loan programs, and there's no floor rate policy. It's interesting to think, just a year and a half ago, June 2022, the rate on the energy efficiency loan was just 2%. So the world is just changing. As Carrie said, who knows what's going to happen with the market? The rate I'm quoting you today may not be the rate in the spring. Things could be different, and hopefully they'll come down somewhat from where they are now. Again, lower equity requirements are available with our traditional loan program. As I said, we'll finance up to 80%. With this, we'll do 90%. We have flexible loan terms. We'll really work with the church. If the church can show us the project is going to save an energy cost, we'll work with you to help that. You figure out how that could help cover your loan payments. That's very important for you to realize. We will do a Restoring Creation loan as a portion of a larger project. Say if a portion of the loan is at this discounted rate, the church ends up receiving a blended rate. For example, say it's a $200,000 loan. We take $100,000 at the energy savings rate today at 4.7, and the other $100,000 of the loan would be at the endowment rate of 5.7, ending up with a blended rate of 5.25. So I would like to hear some of your questions. I really like that and encourage it, but I want to move just for a moment to a question that I get all the time. So I thought I'd start with that. Everyone is like, well, we want to do this. How do we start? Well, the first step really is getting the application. Maybe if you're not even thinking you're going to do it for a while, just to get familiar with the kinds of things that we ask for in the application in terms of 3 years financials and that type of information. So you can get that via our website, or you can get it simply through me. And that's why I want to make it clear what my email address is and what my office number in North Carolina is. I can easily send you that application. Every loan we do is required to be guaranteed by the presbytery where the church is geographically located. So the guarantee does not have to be in place at the time of application. However, prior to the loan being approved and closed, the guarantee does need to be in place. So if you're thinking about doing this, it's a good idea to start the conversation with the presbytery, just so they're aware. Sometimes there's a timeline involved in that part of the process. If it has to go to a presbytery meeting and being voted on, we want to be sure that there's enough time available. Actually, right now, we have about, I think, 7 loans in Highland Presbytery. So the presbytery is quite familiar with how we work, and we work very well together. So in terms of lead time, figure on sending that application electronically along with your financials 2 to 3 months prior to needing the funds. You know, we are Presbyterian, we can't turn these things around on a dime. And I'm surprised how often I get that question. You know, they'll call and say, well, we need the money, you know, next week. It really can't happen that way. Sometimes if it's an emergency situation, know that you could go to the bank and get a line of credit, and we'll do what we call a takeout on that, so you can get our low interest rate eventually. We're happy to do that. That's not even considered a refinance, so you still get the very discounted rate. Another question regarding the loan term, how long do we have to pay it back? Well, it depends on the amount. If it's 100,000 or more, you've got 20 years. That's our max. If it's between 50 and 100,000, 15 years, you have to pay it back. And 50,000 or less, it's 10 years. But also know we have no prepayment penalty. The sooner you pay it back, that's wonderful. I also just want to quickly say, I touched on that our investor loan program is funded via an investment. And we do have a great investment opportunity right now. We're running a rate promotion that's available to all the churches, to individual members. You can purchase our term notes at 4% for a 13-month note. And you've really got that added bonus of the mission. The only thing we do with these funds is loan it back to our churches and other PCUSA entities. So competitive rate of 4%. If you have some money you just want to stash somewhere for 13 months, you get 4%, and you help with the mission of our program and our overall mission of, you know, all of us have the mission of helping to grow the Presbyterian Church. So always know that you can get a great deal of information from our website. And in addition to, that's very easy. Just Google Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program. You can get right there. But I would like to open it up to any questions that you may have now, or if you want to get with me later, I can do that as well. But I will open it up to questions now, if anyone has any. Well, this might be to my advantage, being that there's so much going on right now while I'm in Louisville with our celebration. It's a wonderful time in terms of Jim. He's been with our program for 24 years, first as CFO, and now he's been CEO since 2016. And it's a sad day in some respects. He's going to be here through the end of the year, but we're very happy with him. He wants to spend time with his 6 grandchildren, and we certainly understand that.
There is a question in the chat now. Can you see it, or would you like me to read it?
I'm going to stop sharing because I can't see that.
Oh, I'll be happy to read it to you,
Okay, very good.
as I wrote it.
Thank you.
Can you upgrade current PILT notes to the improved rate?
Yes, as a matter of fact, starting November 1st, you can roll over any funds that you currently have invested with us into a new note at the 4% rate.
How do you go about doing that? Just calling and asking?
Yes. If you want to get with me first, I can go over it with you, or you can call the office in Louisville and they can coordinate that for you.
Awesome. Great. Great to know. Thanks.
Good. We're really encouraging that. I should say our loan demand is way up. Banks aren't too excited about doing church loans right now. So as I used to get a lot of calls saying, oh, we're talking to this bank and what's your rate? Now I'm mostly hearing, well, we talked to the bank and they're just either it's a very, very high rate or they don't want to do it. That's kind of just the way it is right now. So very exciting time for our organization. And we need funds. Need funds. They're going out the door fast.
Go ahead.
Do we have
Ma'am,
any
can I
other
ask you a
questions
question?
for Catherine?
Could I ask a question, please?
Whoever you are, yes.
Okay, thank you. For that 13 month at 4%, that's it's just like a CD, correct?
Yeah.
And
Very much.
is there a maximum amount that could be put into that account?
No, there's no maximum. There's a minimum of $500, but there's no maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking that. Yes,
You're welcome. Thank you.
we encourage large investments these days. Yes.
Anyone else? Catherine, thank you. Thank you. Maybe we'll find someone else to squeeze us in next year from PILP, since we seem to land on the
Always
same
ask,
day.
please. We'd love to be a
But
part
yes,
of this.
definitely. But thank you, and again, give our best to Jim and my thanks to you.
Okay, so I'm going to leave you all now and look forward to hearing from some of you. So take care.
Thanks so much.
May I ask if Rose is here yet?
Thank you.
Although many of you will already know Rose because, like Carrie, she has been with us many times over the years. The Reverend Dr. Rose Niles is a ministry relations officer serving Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, and the Pennsylvania Presbyteries of Philadelphia and Donegal. She works with congregations to create a culture of generosity, to develop gifts and fundraising plans, and provides coaching to finance, stewardship, and endowment committees. A lifelong Presbyterian reared in the Bronx, she has held significant leadership roles in the church and has degrees from Harvard University and New York Theological Seminary. Prior to joining the foundation, Rose served as a development officer at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. She was associate on the staff of the Committee of Theological Education, and she served as a pastor to congregations in the New York area and in Louisville. And as always, Rose, we're grateful for your being with us. We always learn something new.
I
and I
am
hope
grateful
in
to have a few minutes with all of you to just give you a couple of updates about the Presbyterian Foundation. Unfortunately, the last couple of weeks I've been sort of down because I've been struggling with a kidney stone. So it's a joy to be well enough to be able to be with you through this wonderful technology we call Zoom. And I'm not quite sure, I guess, you know, the energy of not being firing on all cylinders afflicted my video camera today. But again, it's just a joy, really a joy to be with you. If the PowerPoint didn't come through from sending it, I'll make sure Steve has it so that, yes?
It did. It's downloading. I'll get it up in, at the minute it's downloaded.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So again, it's a joy to be back with you. And I know I just have a few minutes, so I'm going to move quickly through some topics. Really, two upcoming pieces that I think you would be interested in knowing about include that the financial analysis tool for congregations that we used to have on our website and we had to take down because the denomination stopped collecting the financial statistical information back in 2017. The General Assembly voted to start collecting that information again, as you probably were aware when you filled out the statistical report. So we are hoping to be able to unveil that online financial analysis tool for congregations in January of 2024. So you should be on the lookout for that to be back up and ready for you to use. Also, you may have received communications that the online giving tool resource that we subcontract with Vanco is going to undergo a pretty significant upgrade. And that was scheduled for October, but one of the things we realized is it's not a good time of year to roll out with the amount of giving that happens in the fall and into December. It's not a good time of year to roll out significant upgrades because there's always kinks and things to be worked out in upgrades. So that is actually being postponed also until January of 2024. So you could really move through the first couple of slides are really introductory. That's an overview of what I do so that you can be aware of all the different services that an MRO provides, a ministry relationship officer provides. Next slide. This is what I'm talking about now, that there are two significant pieces you should be aware of coming up in 2024. The return of the financial analysis tool and an online giving upgrade. Next slide. I just want to remind you that we have a wonderful resource in the area of church financial literacy, and it's called the Church Financial Literacy Academy. It is a tremendous resource with short videos on any kind of topic that you might be interested in the financial area for pastors and for church leaders as you're training new leaders to work alongside you. This is really a tremendous resource. Could you skip to the next slide, please? One of the key tools that we talk about a lot is the narrative budget versus the line item budget. And if you don't know about that, there's a great video in that resource, the Church Financial Leadership Academy resource. It's a great, the line item is the amazing accounting tool that we need, but the narrative budget is the visioning tool that we need. So next slide. The Church Financial Leadership Coaching Program is something you may not know about. If you work with pastors that haven't gotten a strong grounding in finance and financial work, the coaching program is a free program that allows them to enroll and have a coach and work for a whole year and deepening their understanding and whatever the areas are that are challenging in the life of the church. And so if anybody has a pastor that is interested in this program, just have them reach out to me and I'll be happy to have that conversation with them. Next slide. Of course, I'm sure you mostly know about the Stewardship Navigator, which is a wonderful tool that we have developed. Next slide. That will help churches develop their narrative budget. There's a narrative budget generator there. Next slide. We've been talking about the online services and how there will be a significant upgrade, I also want to mention that we do have a completely online program for donor advised funds. And of course, donor advised funds are one of the great mechanisms that families in your church can utilize to get some, I'm not a tax expert, but if they consult with their tax expert, they're able to develop a way to have almost like a family foundation. I'd be happy to talk to your church or to families about this. It's a wonderful tool where they can perhaps get some tax benefit for their donations to the church, and also really have a way to teach their family values to future generations and share their family values together. Next slide. We have an array of webinars, and the first slide I have here is one that's upcoming on November 15th about encouraging year-end giving. And here you'll see that it does talk about donor advised funds, qualified charitable distributions, making gifts of securities. These webinars are really high quality. And if you register for it, you'll get the recording, even if you can't attend. And also they live on our website, so you'll be able to go there and see them. Next slide. This is one that was done last May on assets and liabilities and managing your church's balance sheet, right up y'all's alley. And again, it lives on our website. So if you didn't catch it while it was happening, you can go to the website and search for webinars, and you can get a chance to see these resources. Next one. And this is really my final point today. I want to share with you that we had a webinar on a topic that I thought was quite remarkable, which was giving beyond cash, ways to use non-traditional and complex assets. And one of the points that was made by Brian Klontz, who's our special resource in this area, it's something that he does that very few people in the world really specialize in, is pointing out that while Presbyterians as a whole do have these non-traditional assets, these real estate assets and privately held business assets, that at some point in their lifetimes, they think about how to restructure their estate plan and what kinds of large gifts they're going to be making, using very often the vehicle of the donor advised fund. Even though Presbyterians have those resources, we're not starting conversations about those resources. And we don't appear to be the place that is really attracting those resources by and large. So the Giving Beyond Cash webinar really opened my eyes to an important part of the conversation that I, as your ministry relations officer, can enter into with you and help you to move forward in this area. So I did want to bring it to your attention. And folks, that is really what I've got for today. I'm
Oh,
open to
thank
any
you, Rose.
questions. I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Terry kept kidding about a New York minute and how fast she was going through things, but you might be a New York City minute. Does
Well,
anybody have any
I knew I
questions?
didn't have a lot of time, and I wanted to be sure that there was. The other thing I want to say is these webinars very often emerge from topics that are MROs here in the field. So if you have a particular area that you would like to have your resource, the Presbyterian Foundation and the New Covenant Trust Company create for you, please reach out to me and let me know.
Wonderful. Any questions on what we've learned from Rose this morning? Seeing none, Rose, thank you so much for being with us. And hopefully next time we'll actually
I
get
had-
to see your
I
We
had a
did get a
question.
raised hand. We got a raised
Thank you,
hand.
Lynn West.
To
Lynn?
know, in another training, I've heard you talk about a generosity team. I'd like to know, if you only have one person on it, what would their priorities be and how would they go about doing this work?
Thanks. Yes, we do oftentimes encourage a kind of rebranding of the stewardship ministry in a church. In no way, shape, or form are we not saying that our theology about stewardship is enduring. It is. But the word stewardship is not one that has a lot of resonance in our culture. So we do recommend the possibility of rebranding that team as a generosity team. And if you have just one person, my suggestion would be that you look at our resources around storytelling and connecting your mission statement and the things that people really love about your ministry, which is really the way that you also structured that narrative budget tool that I talked about. So I think that the main issue is to determine what brings joy to your congregation, what are the categories of what the church is all about that they really love, and then begin a process of telling stories, getting people to speak from their heart about those areas. And that is, we think, what fuels generosity, as well as, being grateful and saying thank you in creative ways. There's a great book by a man named Charles Lane called Lane, called Ask, Thank, Tell. And I have been recommending that book. So I might get that one person to read that book and then really focus in on storytelling about the things that the congregation really cares about and loves about their mission and ministry. Year round.
Thank you.
Year round. Mhm.
Great question. Thank you, Lynn. Anyone else? For those interested in the book, the title and the author and email address for it have been put in the chat, so you can track that down. Well, Rose, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. And whoever wrote in the chat, and I'm sure others join in saying that we hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Blessings.
At this time, I would like to introduce Pete Peterson, who will be reviewing the financial handbook that Presbytery of the Highlands provides. David Peterson is known to all of us as Pete Peterson, and he is actively involved in the life of Highlands Presbytery. He currently serves as the co-moderator of our administration and coordinating team, which is our leadership team for the Presbytery's ministries. And he's also the moderator of an administrative commission working with the life after death of one of our congregations, Westminster Presbyterian Church. Pete has been a Presbyterian since the early 1970s, and he became quite involved with the church after he completed his military career with the Army. Someone is asking, that manual is on the Presbytery's website. So go there and look under our resources. Pete is and has been, and I'm sure this is not a total list, an elder, a member and a president of a board of trustees, clerk of session, member of a pastor nominating committee, and a church administrator or executive director of 3 large churches, including 2 that many of you will be familiar with, National Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C., and Liberty Corner Presbyterian Church in New Jersey. Pete is a member of the National Association of Church Business Administrators, and I'll share some of what that includes, not only so you can be as impressed as I was, but because some of you may feel called to explore this kind of ministry. It is a 2-year certification program focused on 14 areas of church administration, ranging from theology to accounting, legal issues, personnel management, financial management, building management, food service, counseling, and more. Pete's certification project was entitled When God is in the Details, A Theology of Church Administration. And I have to admit, when I read all of this, I realized you may be seeing him more in the future, because I could imagine asking him to lead our opening devotions in the future, because I think he'd have a lot more to say than, frankly, I often do. With 3 large churches in his portfolio, you might be wondering what Pete has to say to the more typical churches in our denomination, most of which are not as big as National or Liberty Corners. But after Pete left Liberty Corners, he was on the session and was the church treasurer at our own Fairmount Presbyterian Church in Califon, which would be a smaller congregation, before he and his wife joined the Clinton Presbyterian Church, which is also in Highlands. And that, I think, would be considered more of a mid-sized church. So he really has experience at every size of church. But beyond work and church experience, I think Pete understands the majority of our churches, because I think he has a real pastor's heart. That's been my experience of him in the 2 years I've been here. And again, that's a good thing for leading devotions. I have respected Pete since I first got here. I knew a little bit about him, but after learning all that I have, I am especially pleased to welcome him here this morning. So Pete, thank you for being here today, and I look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Well, thank you, Steve, for quite a generous introduction. And I am pleased to be able to talk to you today about financial management in the church. This is not intended to be an excruciating look at how to do financial management, but it's an effort to focus on several policies that are important in the life of every church that we all ought to be functioning under and operating with. And I want to make sure that you are aware of them. As Steve has pointed out, I've been in the place that many of you are over the years and attended these kind of seminars. And it's always good to find out something that I can take away and use in my own setting, and hopefully that will be the case today for some of you after listening to what we have to talk about. The focus of this presentation is going to be on financial management policies. And policies are really important in the life of the church because, number one, they help standardize the way we do things in churches, and they help make sure that the important things that need to be done, in fact, do get done. This applies no matter the size of the church. Whether it's a large church or a small church, there are certain things that have to be done on a regular basis, and policies help to make sure that those kind of things are going to happen. One of the things that policies do is provide clarity and transparency to all levels of church leadership. It helps the elders who have the important task of developing and adopting the policies that the church is going to use. It helps them to know what policies are in place and what policies still need to be developed. But having policies, once they're adopted, has the tendency to help reduce anxiety amongst people that have responsibility for making sure things happen. And managing anxiety in the church, as most of you, I'm sure, are aware, is an important thing. We don't like having anxious people in our churches if we can help it. The policies also can emphasize the standards that must be met in order to be in compliance with the law, with presbytery policy, with our own policies that we've adopted within the church. So it provides a standard for functioning, in addition to making sure that each of the functions that need to happen when they're supposed to happen as well. As we're all very familiar, leadership in the church changes on a regular basis. Our volunteers that are active and help make our programs work come and go. Sometimes they're there for years and years, but other times they're there for just a season. Our elected leaders, our deacons and our elders are there for fixed terms, and after a period of time, they have to move on and others come in and replace them. Hopefully, the pastoral leadership is relatively constant for a period of time, but there again, churches go through pastoral leadership transitions as well. So again, having policies in place help to make sure that as these transitions take place, that there's consistency in how things happen. The policies also make sure that we are in compliance with legal filing requirements, that we are doing things in a legal manner, that we comply with the IRS requirements for acknowledging donations, for example, for filing our information tax returns, and other of those kinds of significant issues. And so when people come into a church and they become aware that the church is operating on a set of policies, they can be comfortable and trust that the leadership of the church is exercising wise and good stewardship of the gifts that are given to the church. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is go through some of the key policies that we want to make sure that are in place in all churches, and also give you some suggestions for resources that you can use to help make these kind of things happen. One of the important things that we do in churches, obviously, is we pay bills. Doing things like paying the utility bills is not generally a complicated process, but the volunteers at the church many times will incur expenses on behalf of the church as they're doing the jobs that some committee has asked them to take on. There will be staff members in the church, everyone from the pastor to the office manager or church administrator to members of the session, for example, that will also incur expenses as they're doing what they do. And so one of the key processes that we do in the church financial setting is reimburse people for legitimate church expenses that have taken place. And a key policy that all churches should have in place is something called a fully accountable expense reimbursement policy. This makes sure that all of the reimbursements that are done to people meet IRS requirements and are fully documented in the event that there's a need to review, go back and look at why was this expense paid and who determined how this came about. The IRS has requirements for documentation of expenses in order to make sure that expense reimbursements do not become taxable income to the person receiving the expense reimbursement. They have policies in place for things like reimbursing mileage done on behalf of the church. A perfect example is all of you pastors out there, or for you that are church administrators or office managers, the pastors that you have on staff, they go out and they do a lot of visitations on behalf of the church as part of their function as pastor of the church. And they're eligible to be reimbursed for the mileage that they incur. Now, there's documentation that needs to happen, how many miles, what the odometer readings were, what the purpose of the trip was for, those kinds of things. But one of the key things that all churches should be aware of, at the beginning of each year, the IRS releases the standard business mileage reimbursement rate for reimbursing business mileage on behalf of all businesses, nonprofits, churches are included in that. So for example, for 2023, the mileage reimbursement rate is 65.5 cents per mile. So the pastor goes out during the month and puts 100 miles on his or her automobile. He or she could submit for reimbursement for those 100 miles and be able to get $65 back in reimbursing for the cost of using their automobile. The rate changes on generally a year-to-year basis. It may even change during the year, depending on what is happening in the economy. But it's important for church financial people to pay attention to those kinds of things. The other thing that the reimbursement plan needs to include is who's authorized to approve reimbursement of expenses. And again, at the beginning of every year, generally speaking, the session is going to appoint key leadership for the committees and activities that are going to operate within the church for the upcoming year. And typically speaking, one of the things that's going to happen is the session will authorize either the chair of the committee or somebody that the committee designates as their key person to be responsible for approving reimbursement of expenses pertaining to that activity. For example, Christian education. Most churches have a CE type of committee, and there are expenses associated with doing Vacation Bible School and Sunday School. So people may go out and have to buy crayons or sheets for the bulletin boards or pencils, any number of things, and those are eligible to be reimbursed under an accountable reimbursement plan. But the key thing here is that all of those expenses need to be documented by receipts, and they need to be approved in advance before the before the expense is reimbursed. So typically what churches will do is they will adopt some kind of a form that is used for submitting requests for reimbursements. And the policy would include things like the chair of the CE committee is responsible for signing off on the request for reimbursement for all CE expenses. And then that gets turned in on a regular basis. The church can set how often reimbursement is going to happen. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's twice a month. Your policy will dictate how often that needs to happen. And the documentation that is required to be submitted in terms of seeking that reimbursement. This applies to not just the people in committees, it applies as well as to people involved in other activities like the deacons or the pastor and his or her expenses. All of that should be submitted on forms that are developed within the church that are then authorized to be signed by specific individuals. And again, at the beginning of the year, the session should designate who those individuals are. In the churches that I have served, that was one of the key things that we started off every year with, was identifying who's going to be heading up each of those different activities and who's going to be responsible for authorizing the expense reimbursement for expenses under that activity. Every activity that the church conducts, generally speaking, is going to have a budget associated. One of the things that the Book of Order requires all sessions to do is to adopt a church budget. And the church budget is going to include not only the income that the church is hoping to receive from various sources throughout the year, but it's also going to include the operating expenses of the church, to include doing Vacation Bible School, to include during Sunday school, the music program of the church. And all of those things are going to have a budget associated with it. So again, as the reimbursement process takes place, the people that are responsible for authorizing reimbursement for expenses in a particular area are going to want to make sure that the budget is being adhered to as we go through the church. One of the things that can be a bit messy in churches, in my experience, is that it's not uncommon for there to be one or more credit cards in use in the church, a church credit card. Typically, the pastor might get a credit card for use in doing their duties. Oftentimes, somebody else will have a credit card as well, a church credit card, like the office manager or church administrator might have a credit card. The expenses in terms of paying the expenses of the use of those credit cards needs to have the same kind of documentation to it as simply submitting a receipt from Walmart or from ShopRite for getting reimbursed for expenses that one of your volunteers took care of in making an event happen. So credit card expenses need to be documented by the receipts that took place when the credit card was used, and then that all gets put into the church records as the year goes along. Another key policy that is essential for churches is to have an investment policy.
Pete, may I ask, are you taking questions in the middle or at the end?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks for asking that, Steve. I was hoping to go through the policies and then get questions at the end. But if we need to ask questions going forward, I mean, we can certainly do that.
Well, the question I had, if you are open to them now, it comes up quite often with pastors. At the beginning of the year, as you said, the congregation approves, or a budget is approved by the session. And in that would be, for instance, a book allowance or a continuing education allowance. Once it's been approved in the budget, does the pastor need to come back for the specific item that they buy in July and say, well, you approved my budget in January. Here it is July, I'm buying a book. I'm asking your permission to buy this book. It seems some churches think you need to have permission on both ends.
The way we do things in the Presbyterian Church is that pastors are entitled to 2 weeks of continuing education. And in most cases, they're also entitled to a book allowance, as you've just highlighted. And while that gives the pastor both the length of time that they can be away, as well as the amount of money that can be spent, the expenditure itself still needs to be documented by receipts in order to receive the money that's been set aside, for example, in this case, the book allowance. So when the pastor finds out at the beginning of January that their terms of call have been approved and it includes a $1,000 book allowance, as they go through the year and they decide to purchase a book to be reimbursed on that book allowance, they're still going to be required to submit a receipt to document the purchase of that book. That just makes sure that everything is fully accounted for and that we're not just sliding money under the table, so to speak.
Absolutely. I guess as my more focused point is, do they need to ask permission prior to buying the book or spending the money that they've been designated for whatever they're doing on continuing ed?
In a general sense, the pastor is going to be responsible to the session for their continuing education. In other words, applying for the time to be away to do the continuing education. And as part of doing that, they may be required by the session to tell the session, what are you going to do this year? You're going off to Princeton to participate in the seminar, or you're going off to someplace else. And that's just a matter of accountability. In terms of spending money, anytime money is spent, whether it's paying for the continuing education, for the trip involved in going to the continuing education, or the books that are purchased as part of the book allowance, all of that ends up needing to be documented in order for the pastor to receive reimbursement for those expenses. Even though they've been authorized to expend the money by the approval of their terms of call, in order to actually get the money, there still needs to be the documentation process in order to clean the records and to have everything in the records that are going to be needed when the records need to be examined.
Definitely on the documentation. Thank you.
Right.
Yep. It looks like Lynn West is taking advantage of the opportunity to ask questions.
No problem. Go ahead.
Lynn?
Yes, I wanted to know, in terms of the budget, if you could speak to the need to have a balanced budget and balance the budget. Particularly, they may not want to go ahead and, if you know your expenses, and then just throw in a bunch of income to make it balanced. But then they worry if the people don't give the money, or they don't get the shared space, or they don't get the grants, they're really caught out because they spent the money. So if you could address those things, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Lynn. And unfortunately, you touched on a sore area for a lot of churches. I'll be upfront and truthful with all of you that I tend to come from what I call an old school philosophy, which basically says that when we adopt a budget, we're adopting a balanced budget. That is, we are not planning to do things that are going to cost more than what we expect to take in terms of income. So that our approved budget for expenses for the year, that includes everything from paid staff to the kinds of things that we buy, the utilities for the buildings, taking care of the buildings, all of that. The expenses are not going to exceed the income that we expect to receive. And that can force a lot of difficult conversations during the budgeting time of the year, because sometimes we're forced to make decisions about not doing some new program that perhaps we might want to do, because our expectation for the income for the next year isn't sufficient to cover the cost of doing that program. unfortunately, many churches do find themselves in a situation where you end up adopting what's called a deficit budget. And for those of you that are active in attending presbytery meetings, you know that even presbytery itself has adopted a budget in the past that is a deficit budget. And we do that with all kinds of, taking into account all kinds of things. In the case of most churches, they realize that they've got some money in a savings account or in an investment account that, if push comes to shove, could help cover the cost of an expense when they're adopting a deficit budget. But ideally, churches are going to want to work hard to, as they're creating the budget, not plan to do things that are going to cost more than what the church is expecting to bring in income. That gets to be a really hard discussion for people. The question that I'm seeing in the chat just now from William Burdick, is define what income is. And income is any source of money that comes into the church. Not all of it necessarily gets put into the budget. For most churches, the primary source of income that the church is going to use during the year is going to be the money that comes in the offering plate on Sunday, and through members pledging to the church, and they're honoring those pledges by sending in their money, whether it's through envelopes or whether it's putting the money in the plate. That's, for most churches, is going to be a primary source of income. There can be other sources of income. You may have, say, a Wednesday night program at church where you do some Christian education or some Vesper services, and you might take up an offering as part of those activities, and that might provide another source of income. For churches that are fortunate enough to have investments, an investment fund that generates income, you might have a policy in place that will generate enough so that a portion of the income that is coming in from investments is designated to be going over to the budget. For example, when I was at National Presbyterian Church, we had a policy in place that dictated that 5% of the income that the church earned on its investments would be designated to support operating income. And so every quarter, we just moved money based on how the investment was doing to meet that 5% guideline.
Pete, could we move on to the next slide, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Another important policy is an investment policy for the church. And this is for churches that have the benefit of having money that is given to the church as a gift to be invested, to use in a particular way, or it's money that has been accumulated over time, and the session has decided that to be good stewards of this money, we need to invest this money to allow it to continue to grow and serve the church for years to come. In creating these kinds of investments and in creating an investment policy, it's usually best to work with an outside professional to help make those kind of things happen. So we heard from, like, for example, Catherine Lynch from the Investment and Loan Program earlier today, and they might be able to work with the church to help them create an investment program to do specific things for the church. The importance of having a plan in place is to know what it is that you're going to do with the investment once they are invested. The policy should include some kind of a philosophy for why you even have these investments. An example that is in the Church Financial Handbook says that all resources should be handled with gratitude to God in the spirit of Christian stewardship, with appreciation to those who made the funds available and in accordance with their wishes to the extent specified by them, with concern for those whose good money is to be used, and with commitment to employ the money in such a way that its use will be used to glorify God and transform lives. You want to focus in the way that the money is going to be used. And there are all kinds of outside resources that can be used. Another good place to go is the New Covenant Trust Company that the Presbytery uses to handle its investments. And they can help draft both the policy as well as the plan for what's going to be happening. The plan needs to include things such as what purposes the money that is being invested will ultimately be used for. It needs to include things such as a percentage of how much money is going to be invested in certain risk categories, such as stocks versus fixed income categories. And the other thing that's important in investment policy for many churches is social responsibility. When I was president of the board of trustees at a church in Washington, D.C., this was 40 years ago, and one of the things that was very important at the time in the Presbyterian Church was concern over the apartheid policy that existed then in South Africa. And so one of the things that the church adopted as a policy was making sure that its investment managers did not invest in any companies that invested in activities that took place in South Africa. You can have all kinds of social responsible policies built into your plans. It's not uncommon for churches, for example, to not want to invest in companies that are involved in alcohol distribution or the creation of alcoholic drinks, or in gambling. You might have concerns in your church over things such as abortion and not wanting to invest in companies that are involved in or even medical activities that are involved in things like providing abortions. So all of these things are important considerations in drafting up your investment policy. In all these cases, the session should create an investment committee or designate a team that is responsible for working with whoever you're using to create your investment and monitoring what happens with those investments and reporting back on a regular basis to the session as to how that happens. Another important policy that churches should have in place is a gift acceptance policy. You might think that churches should be open to pretty much any kind of gift that people want to give, but there can be all kinds of hazards that churches encounter if they simply start accepting any kind of gift that people want to give. And so it's important that the session think through and adopt a policy about what sorts of gifts you want to accept and in what form those gifts can take place. What's common is to accept things such as cash or credit card payments from individuals, having planned gifts where people say at the end of my life, I want to make this, donate this to the church as part of my love for what the church is doing. It could be marketable securities. We're talking about stock transactions, mutual funds, life insurance. Many people will designate the church as a beneficiary on their life insurance. The session's going to want to think through all of the different ways that money or gifts might come into the church and have a policy on what sorts of things are going to be accepted by the church. Gifts of property and other tangible items are particularly important to think through, because not all property is necessarily a good idea to accept as a gift. Many forms of property can have a great deal of difficulty associated with them. Everything from issues regarding the title of the property to things such as there's an oil tank on the property that needs to be disposed of. There's a common thing in church management that churches should never accept the gift of a cemetery. Now, we laugh in my circles when we say that, because we know what's being talked about, and that is many times families, particularly generations ago, bought up cemetery plots thinking that their families were all going to be buried in these plots, and over the generations the families have changed their minds about things, and these plots are no longer being used, and they're trying to figure out what to do with them. I'm not saying that a church can't take a cemetery plot and have it be used for that purpose, but it can be complicated, and churches' sessions need to think through the wisdom of accepting those kinds of gifts when you're creating your gift acceptance policy. Another place that becomes difficult sometimes is people want to donate tangible things like old furniture or vehicles, and those things become difficult in terms of assessing their value, because the IRS has regulations requiring how those kind of things ultimately get valuated, and that can be complicated for a church to try to administer. So think through whether or not you want to accept tangible items. Restricted gifts can also be an issue. Somebody might decide, I want to give the church $100,000, and I want this gift to be used to support homeless children. That may be a wonderful concept on the surface, to have money to be able to support that kind of a ministry. But if the church is not in a situation where it has the capability to create that kind of a ministry, if one doesn't exist already, maybe it's not a good idea to accept money that's designated specifically for that kind of a purpose. In another case, it might be that the money be used for a specific mission. And again, it may be a mission that the church has no relationship to or doesn't have any desire to be involved in. And so having a gift acceptance policy that ensures that anytime a restricted gift is being offered to the church, that the session will have an opportunity to discuss it, to review it, and to make a decision about whether or not that's an appropriate thing for the church to accept. That's important to have that in a policy so that the session is covered when you talk about accepting those kind of gifts. Finally, there's all kinds of policies, but another key thing that we want to focus on is having a financial review policy in place. The Book of Order requires the session to ensure that a financial review is conducted of all church financial activities on an annual basis. It does not require that it be a full-blown audit, the way a lot of corporations have to have their books examined. But depending on your circumstances, you may decide that that is appropriate to have a full-blown audit. The simple requirement is that there be a financial review. And for many churches, this is done internally. The session at the beginning of the year should appoint an audit or a financial review committee that is responsible for ensuring that all of the church finances are reviewed in a fashion, and a report is made back to the session, which ultimately gets recorded in the session minutes. The financial handbook for the presbytery has actually got a great checklist in there for an internal financial review committee to use in examining all of the church finances. The important thing that I want to highlight in making sure that you have this process in place is that all of the church finances are subject to review, not just what the church treasurer is responsible for, or just for the operating budget. But if the deacons, for example, are responsible for church benevolences, people are able to give money to a benevolence fund to help people who are having a hard time financially, and the deacons are responsible for administering that benevolence fund, those records need to be part of the financial review as well. It might be typical that you have other activities in the church, say Sunday schools, that may have may raise money for specific kind of things. And again, all of those records for those kinds of side financial operations in the church need to be part of the overall financial review that is done and report given to the session on a yearly basis. The important thing is to protect the church, to protect those people in the church who have financial responsibility. This is not a looking to see what's being done wrong. This is an effort to certify that things are being done correctly, and everybody who's got a responsibility for doing church finances, they are in fact doing things correctly. That's the ideal in terms of the final report that is given to the session each year. But we need to make sure that the system is examined for understanding that everything is being done when it's supposed to happen. For example, church offerings. Church offerings, when they come in on Sunday, should be immediately counted following the service by at least 2 unrelated individuals. And that money is then taken and deposited in the bank with the receipt given to the church treasurer or to the church administrator as part of the church financial records. There should be somebody who is also recording the gifts, the offerings that are given by members as part of their pledge system to the church, to ensure that at the end of the year, the contribution statement for each member of the church is able to be sent out to document all of the giving that was given during the church. And people have the documentation, and they're instructed that if there's any errors in this, please let us know so that we can correct our records. And part of the financial review is making sure that all of these things happen on a timely basis. And so the checklists that are in the church financial guide or that are available from other resources can be essential in helping an audit or a financial review committee do this kind of analysis and then give a report to the session.
Hey, Pete.
Yep.
It's Jean. There's a question in the chat, and I'll answer that because we get this question all the time. Can you talk about audits? Should they be done in-house or should they be an outside firm to be employed? And really the answer is depends on the situation. And the larger your system and the bigger the church, the bigger the amount of categories you work with and funds and stuff like that, you probably you should be looking at an outside financial review. You don't have to do a full-blown audit, but you can do a financial review. And that's if you're dealing with large amounts of endowments, that kind of thing. The other time you should do an outside firm would be when you've had a significant change in your financial management, whether it's a long-time treasurer has left or there has been some concerns about financial mismanagement. You should always do it from the outside. Smaller churches, you can always use an outside firm to do your annual review, but you can do it inside using the policies that are available to you, so it can be done that way. Also, we've had churches ask, because they didn't, you need to have people who are not related to the financial people doing this, and that's not always available to you in a small church. And we've had small churches go to neighboring churches and say, do you have someone who will do a financial review for us, and we'll do your financial review.
Yeah.
So you can do that too. But it doesn't have to be super involved or anything like that. But those would be those kind of, when should you go outside and use a firm or do in-house?
If I could also say, I agree with everything Jean said. The one other time I would suggest people think about some kind of audit or committee work is when you've had a transition in pastors, because that gives some clarity for everybody as to what was happening before and what's happening now.
The other occasion that will sometimes dictate the need for having an outside full-blown audit is if the church is taking out a good-sized loan. For example, you've decided to build a new structure, or you're doing a significant capital improvement campaign, and the financial institution that you're going to get the money from, as part of their process in deciding whether to loan the money, they want to see a gap audit of the church financial records. That can be a big deal. So churches, again, need to think through that process before they engage in some of these kinds of activities. But in order to meet the requirements of the Book of Order, the Book of Order simply requires that there be an annual financial review. It can definitely be done internally, but as Jean has pointed out, ideally it will be people who have some expertise in doing this kind of review that are not related to the people within the church that are responsible for doing the financial activity. And it is a process to review the process of how finances happen, as well as what the records indicate have happened, and ultimately a report made to the session.
Pete, for those of you who are in Highlands Presbytery, you might be a friend to your clerks of session, because that is going to be a point of emphasis in the year ahead and following. Because we've had churches that have said, well, you know, COVID made things hard. And that was true 2 years ago. We've managed to figure out a lot of things, including our being together now via Zoom. And so starting in 2023, if a church says they haven't done an audit or had a committee review the finances, both directly of the church and those under the church's supervision, those churches, which means you and your records, will be referred to the Committee on Ministry to say, this is a very important function for trust and transparency, and this church has not done this. And then it's up to the Committee on Ministry to do what they will. But if you would all like to avoid that sense of anxiety, as Pete said, managing anxiety is important, you'll want to make sure you get those financial reports, the auditing, etc. in.
Can we go to the next slide? The record retention policy is definitely a policy that should be in place for every church. The session needs to adopt this, but it does not apply only to financial records or the records that the treasurer creates. It applies to all kinds of stuff. It applies to personnel records. It applies to the church property records. It applies to inspection records, all of those kinds of things. And there's a great record retention guideline that is included in the Presbytery handbook for financial activity that will help sessions develop a policy for their church in terms of how to maintain records. But just be aware that certain financial records need to be maintained in a specific way, and you need to consult a record retention guide to know how to maintain records. In those cases where records are supposed to be maintained on a permanent basis. For example, your property deed records and so on. The ideal place to have those kind of things is a fireproof container, a safe or some other kind of container, or a bank deposit box that is off-site. Another way of maintaining records is to ensure that they are electronically copied into an iCloud or some kind of an iCloud storage capability. There's all kinds of those things available as well. But consult the property retention guide in the financial handbook for being able to create this kind of an important policy document as well. As a final note, let me draw your attention to the resources that are available to you. A principal one in this case is going to be going to the Highlands Presbytery website. And at the top of the page, under resources and documents, if you click on that tab, you'll come down and there'll be a place called Treasurer Financial Management Resources. And if you click on that, towards the bottom of the page, you're going to find 4 different important guides to be used. The first one listed is the Guideline for Financial Activity in the Church, a Treasurer's Handbook. That's the important guide that anybody who's involved in financial management in the church needs to have as a guideline. There, you will also find a copy of the Record Retention Guideline that we were just talking about. You will also find a checklist for doing this internal review or audit, what's to be included in doing that audit. And finally, there'll be a draft policy for gift acceptance. That'll walk you through the kinds of things that the session needs to think about in developing a gift acceptance policy. The other things that are available are clearly through the Presbyterian Foundation that Rose Niles talked about, New Covenant Trust Fund, and you can find a variety of resources through places like the PCUSA homepage as well, pcusa.org. We've run out of time. Are there other questions that I can answer in whatever time we have left?
I was wondering how you can include paying debt from a previous year in your budget.
Well, it would be a specific line item that would get included, as in most cases, it would be included as part of the budget. There would be an item in the budget for past year obligations or for ongoing obligations. If you've got a church loan, say a 20-year church loan, one of the items that you're going to have in your budget is the obligation to make the monthly payments on that loan. It just becomes it becomes a line item in the budget for expenses.
Thank you.
Other questions? That concludes my presentation, Steve. It's a lot of material to cover. I strongly recommend going and taking a look at the Financial Activity Handbook. It's got loads of resources in there for everyone.
Okay, we do have a couple quick questions. All these links will be on the website. Some of those right where Pete had said under the Treasurer and Financial Management, we are working on some additional documents that you saw today, that some samples, those will be posted this week. I just ran out of time last week to get it done. You can find all these on the Highlands, the Presbytery of the Highlands webpage. The presentations will also be posted on the webpage pretty soon, the PDFs along with the video. And then we have one question. We have a guest pastor who will be making more than 600 in 2023. Am I correct that I must issue her a 1099? And the answer is yes.
Yes, it is.
Yep. You do have to, if you have a guest preacher who's preached, enough times to make over $600, then you do have to issue a 1099.
We obviously haven't had time to go into all of the church financial management. That's a whole separate seminar that we could do. But one of the important things for churches to really do pay attention to is if you have guest musicians, you have guest pastors or speakers that come in, anytime you pay any person over the course of the calendar year at least $600 or more, then you are required to issue a 1099 to that individual for that money that you gave to them.
For those of you who are new to the financial management workshop that we do annually, part of it is usually taking parts of the financial management manual and highlighting them so that over the course of several years, you have been reminded of every little bit of it. So for questions that didn't come up today that you wondered about, and if you didn't ask or if this wasn't quite the right time, keep coming back and eventually we'll get to it.
You
Pete, thank
also,
you so- yes.
Also, those of you who are with the Presbytery of the Highlands, if you do have financial questions throughout the year, you can contact the Presbytery office and either contact me or Liz Hutchinson. Most of the time when you ask me a question, I'll just refer you to Liz anyway. So just go straight there, and she is great at answering the questions. And if she doesn't know, she is super at looking for the answer and helping you find the answer.
And for those of you in Highlands, please note, Jean said to call her or Liz. My name never came up.
No,
And that's because that's for everybody.
no offense, Steve. No offense.
But I can direct you to Jean or Liz if you call me first. Folks, thank you so much for being with us. We're all the richer by your questions and your comments. You bring out things that we hadn't thought to mention, and we're the better for it. And we're the better for it as a church when we are indeed acting as the body of Christ. I want to thank all the speakers and to Liz and Jean for all of their help this morning. And let's close with a brief word of prayer, and you can enjoy the rest of your day. Loving God, you have blessed us with this time, with the gifts of people who know much, and with the questions of those who are eager to learn more. Bless us all that we might grow in wisdom and in grace to serve you with a full and loving heart. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Again, thank you all. Blessings, everyone.
All right, bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.